I am super excited for today's video where I'm going to be giving you personalized book recommendations based off of your Instagrams. I thought this would be a really fun way to offer personalized book recommendations, so I asked all of you to submit your Instagrams if you were interested in having me review your profile and see if I can pick up anything based off of the books you're posting or any other photos that you're posting to think of a book recommendation that would be perfectly personalized just for you. I got a lot more submissions than I was expecting, so I'm unfortunately not going to be able to go through every single Instagram page today, or we would be here for a very long time. But if you like this video and you have fun while you're watching, let me know down in the comments below if you'd be interested in seeing a part 2 or even a part 3 to this series, and we can definitely keep this going in the future if it turns out to be super fun. So first up, we're gonna get started with Lorena's profile. I did give my channel members early access to give their input to have their profiles reviewed for this video. So just another fun perk of being a channel member and getting to get some early input in the videos. But let's jump into Lorena's. So she said that she didn't have a lot of bookish photos in her actual feed, so she decided to make this highlight for all of her Instagram stories so we can review what kind of books Lorena likes to read and give her a personalized book recommendation. So these stories are going to go in order of oldest to newest, so I'm going to click through these a little more quickly to get to the more recent things to understand what Lorena likes to read better, but I'm seeing a lot of thrillers, Southern Book Club Guide, some romance, YA in here, Best Friend's Exorcism, more thrillers, dark emotional stories, likes the thought-provoking type of books. Haven't read that one. More thrillers, a little bit of horror mixed in here. Oh, and back to some romances. Love a contemporary romance with a dark twist. Okay. Mary, it's a good one. The Island. Oh, yep. You're welcome for giving me that recommendation. That book is so fun. Family Game was a 4-star for you. Good to know. 5-star memoir. 4-star romance. Our ratings are so similar. Haven't read this one yet. Mother Thing for Elizabeth's Book Club. It happened one summer, and the city we became feel like a fantasy this week. Okay, based off of all of that information, Lorena likes thrillers, she likes fast-paced books, she likes thought-provoking books with darker themes and emotional stories as well. So I'm going to throw a couple recommendations out there for a range of those things. First, I would recommend The Getaway by Lamar Giles. I did see that Lorena has read a little bit of YA at least through some of her previous posts, and this is a YA that is a mix of like thriller, dystopian, horror. It blends a lot of those different things that she likes. It has social commentary behind it, and it is about this group of teens living in this place called Karloff Country, which is very inspired by Disney. And it's like a 5 minutes in the future type story where all the world is falling to shambles, but in Karloff Country, everything seems like it's really great and that's the safe haven. But then the teens start to realize there's something darker going on with Karloff Country, and they're trying to figure that out. And there is a large social commentary piece around privilege and class and race, and I think Lorena would really enjoy that one. I'm also going to recommend something a little off the wall with The Measure by Nikki Erlich. This is a literary fiction book that also has this dystopian feel to it, and you're following a couple different characters going through their lives, and this weird thing happens in the world where one day everyone receives this box with a string in it, and the length of the string is indicative of the length of your life. And so it's all about the choice of, do you choose to know when you're going to die or not? And if you do choose to know, what do you do with that information, and how does that change the way you live? There's so many emotional conversations in here, and it's not necessarily fast-paced, but it's a really fast read because you just want to see how all these different characters' stories are going to play out. And then for something that seems right in line with Lorena's taste, I'm going to recommend The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. This is a dark, edgy thriller, and so I think it'll be something that is set up with this fun setting that Lorena looks like she's used to with these fast-paced thrillers, but then it has this dark edge to it as well. This is a story about these 4 writers going to this writing retreat out in this isolated area. This famous author is doing this program where she is inviting a couple up-and-coming authors to come and write their novels together, and she's going to be coaching them, and they'll give each other feedback on their writing. But then things take an extremely dark twist, and this one was so fun, and it was just so crazy to see how everything was playing out in the end, and I think Lorena would really enjoy this one. Next up we have Andre, and based off of some of the books that I've seen Andre like, which includes things like Notes on an Execution, Bathhouse, Night Bitch, My Sister the Serial Killer, Pretty Little Wife, Tender as the Flesh, The Wife Between Us, Pretty Girls, and The Kind Worth Killing. It seems like Andre likes these really dark, sinister type stories with just really interesting, morally gray characters to follow through their journey. A lot of these are books that have this really interesting setup, and then you're kind of seeing what happens to the characters after they're making some dark decisions. Or in books like Notes on an Execution, you're exploring some broader themes about people who make bad choices and what that means for the people around them in their life. And so all these books made me think of the book Yes, Daddy by Jonathan Parks Ramage. Especially seeing Bathhouse on this list made me remember this book and think that this would be a really good personalized book recommendation for Andre. This is a story about obsession and class, and it's just really dark and a really fast read. In this story, you're following this guy named Jonah who moves to New York and wants to become a successful playwright, and he's just trying to find his break into the industry. Then he meets this guy named Richard who is all of his dreams. This man is a successful playwright, and he ends up beginning an affair with him. When he is lured into Richard's world, he sees so many dark, sinister things, and you're really just following what happens in the time that he spends with Richard and the aftermath of this experience. This is kind of described as a gothic novel, a little bit of a thriller, a little bit of a horror, mostly with a literary fiction feel. It has darker themes and darker explorations of the human psyche to explore, and it could really spark some great conversation. So this would be my personalized book recommendation for Andre. Next up we have Barb. Let's take a look at Barb's posts and see if there's anything that sparks some ideas. So I see 5 Survive, a mix of some fantasy and thriller and mystery books, some graphic novels in here. You got some horror books, some Stephen King, and then in her stories we can see her 2023 reads so far and what she's enjoyed. So Pumpkinheads was a 5-star, The Personal Assistant, I haven't read this, a 4-star, Every Heart a Doorway, 5 stars, I agree. 5 Survive was a 5-star, absolute crazy ride. I have not read this one yet. Okay, we're gonna go based off of 5 Survive, which I have not read yet, but I have heard about, and I understand the concept of it is it's like this survival thriller. It's set all in a short period of time, around like 8 hours or so, and it's a group of characters who are in danger, and you know someone's going to die, and it's a high stakes, fast paced thriller. I think it's also YA because Holly Jackson typically writes YA, could be adult, but I think it's YA. But I'm going to recommend a new book that recently came out and that I recently read, which is Going Dark by Melissa de la Cruz. This is also a YA mystery thriller that is pretty short, it reads pretty fast, and I had a lot of fun with it as just a fun, fast paced mystery thriller, and I think Barb would as well. This is a story where there is this influencer named Amelia Ashley who goes missing. She went on a trip with her boyfriend, and he ended up coming back from the trip, and she did not. He looks incredibly suspicious, and so the police start looking into him, and you follow his perspective, and then you also follow the perspective of this girl named Harper, who is a coder who is going back through Amelia Ashley's YouTube videos and all her different posts and trying to piece together what happened to Amelia Ashley. I think Barb would enjoy this because it looks like she tends to enjoy YA books, and I know she loves a good thriller. And I think Barb would also find this one fun because Barb is also an online creator, and I am as well, and I thought that was a cool, fun element of the Amelia Ashley story as well, that she's a creator and she's got a Patreon and she's got a YouTube channel, and there's different pieces of her life that are out on the internet that are being used to help piece together what might have happened to her, and so I think Barb would appreciate that as well. Next up we have Clara, and I found this photo on Clara's profile, which is her all-time favorite books. So let's take a look at some of these. We have The Poppy War, which I haven't read, but I do know about. The Humans by Matt Haig, All the Bright Places, Pet Sematary by Stephen King, Piranesi, House of Leaves, Jurassic Park, Ring, which I have not read yet, but I want to read very soon. A couple of Celeste Ng books in here. So this looks like a mix of some fantasy, some emotional books about like the human experience and humanity, and also some more horror books with complex themes about the human experience in them as well. So based off of that, I'm going to recommend Foe by Ian Reid. I would really recommend anything by Ian Reid, but because I'm also seeing these themes of a little bit of the like sci-fi fantasy in here as well. I think that might be a fun place for Clara to begin with Ian Reid if you haven't read from Ian Reid yet. This is a story where there's this couple living out on this farm, and one day this random man shows up to their house and tells the couple that the man has been selected to go up to space for this space travel expedition, and they're going to be preparing him for his time in space, and it's going to be this long process, and the man doesn't know why he's selected or anything that's going on, but he just has no other option. There's also this weird element where when he goes up to space, his wife is going to be left with a companion, and that's pretty much all I can say about it. You kind of have to keep it vague with Ian Reid synopses, but it was a really good story. It's like a psychological literary fiction horror type of book, so it blends together a couple of the things that I'm seeing in Clara's favorite books, and I feel like you would enjoy this one. The next batch of recommendations I'm going to do are some booktubers, so these are people you might also be familiar with, and if you're not, you should definitely go check out their channels. I will have them all linked down below. First up, we have Gabby. Gabby is a Virgo like me, and I think Gabby is also a Cancer moon like me. I'm a Cancer moon, Cancer rising, and I see Gabby post about astrology stuff a lot, and I feel like we're very aligned astrologically. So hopefully that'll help me give a really good book recommendation. So this post is some of Gabby's favorite books of last year, and we have Family Game, The Drowning Kind, This Thing Between Us, Cackle, When the Reckoning Comes, and The Change. Also some of Gabby's favorite romance books, 7 Days in June, People We Meet on Vacation, Part of Your World, What If You and Me, Funny You Should Ask, and A Cat Cafe Christmas. She really liked The Family Game. Ooh, and Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour, which is wildly underrated and forgotten about by a lot of people, I feel like. I don't feel like that book comes up a lot, but that one was very, very good. So I'm sensing this theme of some deep reads, some emotional reads, some character-driven books too, or like some moody, atmospheric type stories, but also some lighthearted stuff, some fun stuff, a little bit of quirk to it, some romance in here as well. So a little bit of a balance, which makes sense for a Virgo with a Cancer moon or Cancer rising, whatever Cancer placement Gabby has. I'm not seeing this in the photos, and I'm not sure if Gabby has read this yet, but for a romance recommendation, I would recommend Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane. This is a Christmassy, wintry type of romance book, but I mean, you could read it now still and still catch it in the sort of wintry period, or you could just save it for next Christmas if you haven't read it yet. But this is a really lovely sapphic romance story about this woman, really two women who are both on their own different healing journeys, and they end up meeting on Christmas Eve, and they have a quick little romance, but something goes wrong, and then a year later they end up brought back together serendipitously because one of them is now fake dating and getting ready to fake marry the other one's brother without knowing it's her brother, and then they're all spending Christmas together, and there's all this tension and there's all this healing to be done, and it's just a really beautiful love story. For a darker recommendation, something more on the thriller / horror side, I would recommend Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. Again, this is very character driven. It has themes of grief. It is just a short little novella, but it really packs a punch, and I think Gabby would really enjoy it. This is one of my favorite horror novellas of all time. It's about this woman who lost her son, and she is desperately grieving the loss of him, and one day she ends up shedding blood on the site of his death, and then she thinks she starts seeing him or seeing his ghost, and it's about how much she's willing to sacrifice to get back some semblance of her loved one. Both of these are really moving stories, but in very different ways, so it kind of depends on if you're looking for something lighthearted and romantic or darker. Next up, we have Katrina, and I know Katrina likes to read a lot of horror books, so it's going to be a little bit hard to recommend a book that she hasn't read yet because she reads a lot of horror books. I love the aesthetic of her page and all these fun photos she does too. Also, this is probably like the best photo of all time. I'm obsessed. Okay, there's no particular reason that I'm drawn to this book recommendation for Katrina, but it is just coming to mind looking at all of these photos and thinking about some newer releases that I've read, because I'm trying to get ahead of what she hasn't read yet because she's read so much horror. But I think you would really like The Spite House by Johnny Compton. This is a haunted house story that follows this family who's going to live in this haunted house. You have this dad who has 2 daughters, and he will do anything to protect his daughters. In the beginning, they're on the run from something that you as the reader do not know the full details of. And he gets this job opportunity to go live in this haunted house and record all instances of paranormal activity. And he's willing to do it because he has to do something to be able to have some income to support his daughters. And you follow them as they go live in this haunted house together and piece together the answers of, is the house haunted and by what/who if it is. It was a super solid haunted house book with some really great characters in it as well, and I think Katrina would really enjoy it. Next up we have Jordan from Sorry Booked Solid. Jordan likes to read a wide range of books, and they're quite different from what I read at times. We do have some things in common. She really enjoyed The Violin Conspiracy, which I did enjoy as well, just not quite as much as she did. We also both really enjoyed The Measure, and there's a little bit of overlap in some mystery thrillers that we read as well. But she also reads romance, literary fiction, sci-fi. She really had me wanting to read this book, Subcutanean, which I haven't gotten around to yet, but it sounded really, really interesting. She also reads some YA and even some middle grade now, I think, since the bookathon, read-a-thon happened. So I'm thinking of a little bit of a younger recommendation for Jordan that is a little bit mystery, but also a little bit literary fiction and a little bit historical. So kind of like a blend of a lot of these different themes. And that book that I'm thinking of is one of my favorites of all time, The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White. This is a Frankenstein retelling that, instead of following Frankenstein, follows Elizabeth. Elizabeth is this girl who doesn't have much of a future ahead of her until she gets taken in by Victor's family, and she becomes really good friends with him, and they grow up together, and it kind of seems like they're going to end up together and he's going to be her path forward in the future. But when you are following them in the story, Victor has gone missing, and if he's missing, so is Elizabeth's chance at a future. And so she sets off to try to go find him, and what she ends up finding is the path he left behind him of destruction that reveals that he may be a little bit more of a monster than she ever really knew. If you're familiar with the idea of Frankenstein, you kind of have a suspicion of the direction that the story is going to go, but it's still so good. It's very character driven. I absolutely love the writing and the atmosphere of this one, and it's one that I think Jordan would enjoy as well. Next up we have Marcy, and Marcy loves a good horror book. She also reads some thrillers, and she just reads a lot of books that I've never heard of. She reads a lot of indie published things and puts a lot of different books on my radar. So if you're looking for more indie horror recommendations or just some really great aesthetic photos, I would definitely recommend checking out Marcy's page. Ooh, I also forgot that Marcy really liked Daphne, which I also thought it was pretty good, but I know that's like a slower, weirder book that isn't going to be for everyone, but that is a really good inspiration to give that kind of recommendation for Marcy as well. I don't know if Marcy has read this yet, but I do see it in her stack of books that she hauled it. I'm not sure if she's read it yet, but I was going to recommend Mary by Nat Cassidy. Mary is this weird horror book where you're following this older woman named Mary who begins having these symptoms that seem to be related to menopause, but it also seems like there may be something kind of supernatural afoot too, because when she looks at herself in the mirror, she sees herself deteriorating. When she looks at other women, she sees them deteriorating. She's hearing things and maybe seeing things too, and she is on a journey where she's returning back to her hometown because her aunt calls her to help take care of her as she's dying, and she's starting to uncover the secret history of her town and her own past. My only qualm with this book is it is a little bit long, but it is just a really intriguing read. Mary is a really interesting character to follow, and this book has a lot of like classic horror feel to it as well. You can tell this author really likes Stephen King and other kind of classic horror tropes and elements. It feels like there's a lot of little nods to that, and I know Marcy really likes Stephen King in general, but also like classic horror feel. And so I think that she would really enjoy Mary. Again, not sure if you've read it yet or not, but I know it's on your shelves. So if you haven't gotten around to it yet, bump it up on your TBR. Next up we have Gabby, and Gabby's a little tricky because we read super similarly. So we're usually reading the same books like all the time. We always end up accidentally buddy reading things without knowing we are. It's like we have some kind of weird connection where we're always like in the mood for the same thriller or horror books at the same time. So it's a little bit harder to think of things that she hasn't read yet, but I do feel like I have a pretty good sense of her taste, of what she likes and what she doesn't like. And she has a really great Instagram feed that she keeps super updated with lots of pictures of books she's enjoyed or different themes, or even ones that are just fun groups of like books of the same color. So I have a lot of material to go off of here. Ooh, you know, this is a book that is really top of mind because I just recently recommended it in a video I did recently, and I don't think Gabby has read it yet. It's a little bit of an older book, and it's kind of like a thriller with horror themes to it as well. And that is Perfect Days by Rafael Montez. I included this book as my #1 book recommendation for books that you should read if you really enjoy the TV show or the book You, which I'm pretty sure Gabby has enjoyed that as well. But Perfect Days is this story about this guy who gets really obsessed with this girl, and he just wants to make her fall in love with him. And so he kidnaps her and takes her on a road trip because he thinks that's the solution to all of his problems. It's really short and dark and twisted, and I feel like Gabby would really enjoy that one. I'm pretty sure she hasn't read it. And if you haven't, Gabby, I think you should, because I think you'd really like it. Next up, we have Lena from Lena's Bookshelf, who really likes to read thrillers and historical fiction, especially historical fiction lately, I've been noticing. And I am the worst person to go to for historical fiction recommendations because I think I've read like 2 in my entire life, but I can definitely give a thriller recommendation. So I know Lena really enjoys Lucinda Berry books. She also really enjoyed The Measure, and she's one of the few people in this world who agrees with me that 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard was an amazing book. Kind of an off-the-wall recommendation that comes to mind for me, and I'm not sure if Lena's read this one yet. And it's not even a favorite of mine, but it's just kind of like a classic fun thriller to read that seems a little bit in line with some of the thrillers that I see Lena enjoying, is The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark. That is kind of a cat and mouse game type thriller about these 2 women who have secret pasts, and they're both kind of chasing each other down. It wasn't a super memorable thriller for me, but it was a really fun, fast-paced read at the time. And I just feel like based off of the other types of thrillers Lena seems to enjoy, that one could be something that she likes. And then also based on enjoying Lucinda Berry and Kirsten Modulin too. I'm pretty sure Lena enjoys Kirsten Modulin. I don't know if she's read a Frida McFadden yet, but I would recommend trying out a Frida McFadden book because they're just fun and fast-paced, and they're not always the most original, wonderful, most groundbreaking things ever, but they're just a fun time. And I feel like Lena likes these types of thrillers that can just be a fast, fun, don't have to put a lot of thought behind it type of reads, which I love those too. I love a good balance of those and then the more heavy stuff. And I feel like Lena likes the heavier themes in the historical fiction, and thrillers, it seems like she wants something a bit more fun and fast. So I would definitely recommend The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. That one is my favorite of hers. I've also read Never Lie, which wasn't quite as good. And if you think about it, it doesn't really make a lot of sense the way the twist goes in that one, but they're just so readable. They're just books you fly through and you can't put them down. So I would recommend checking out something from Frida McFadden as well. Next up, we have Liv of Liv's Library, who really likes a good cozy read. She reads a mix of romance, mystery, thriller, historical stuff, fantasy stuff, cozy fantasies, so a pretty broad range of interests. She also likes graphic novels and middle grade things as well, but I feel like at the root of what she enjoys is coziness. Like, her channel just gives cozy vibes, her Instagram gives cozy vibes, like she just gives ultimate coziness, and I feel like that's the type of read she is often looking for. I'm not sure if she's read this one yet because it came out a while ago, and I'm not seeing it necessarily yet, but it feels like something she would have read. But I would recommend for someone who reads this type of aesthetic and is looking for a cozy read, something like The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin, which is a YA, I guess fantasy is the way to classify it, story about this girl. It's kind of like a coming of age story with her and her powers, and she's at this academy, and her powers like change with the seasons, and so there's a lot about nature and just emotional stuff as she's coming of age, and I feel like that would be something that Liv would really enjoy. I would also definitely recommend something like Everybody in My Family Has Killed Someone, which it looks like she is either currently reading or has just read or is getting ready to read maybe. This looks to be on her radar, and that is definitely the type of mystery story I would recommend. I really enjoyed this one too. It's like a really perfect cozy mystery where this family is coming together for this retreat and everyone in the family has killed someone, and it's just really like tongue-in-cheek the way it's written, super witty, and someone ends up dead and you're following one of the main family members trying to figure out who's responsible for the dead body. This also makes me think of You Must Remember This by Kat Rosenfield. I feel like that's the type of mystery that Liv would enjoy as well. That is similarly a story about this family who is coming back together for the holidays, and it's a story that's told in the present and with flashbacks to the past, and the connecting character is the grandmother, Miriam, and so you're seeing her as she is like at the end of her life and present day, and she has dementia and she's having trouble keeping sense of all of her memories, but then you're also getting flashbacks to when she was a teen and her love story and what was going on in her life at that point. Again, someone ends up dead and you're trying to piece together all the different elements, but it just has a really like cozy feel to it the whole time as well. And even though it's set at Christmas, I really feel like you could still read it at least within the next month or two while it's still kind of wintry outside. So yeah, those are the main recommendations I would give to Liv. Next up, we have Darian, who reads a lot of fantasy books, but she said in particular she's looking for a thriller or horror book recommendation for someone who's like newer to those genres or doesn't read as much of that. So we're gonna go try to base off of what she likes in her romance and fantasy reads that she's reading, and we're gonna see what we can do. We're gonna piece some things together here. Ooh, you know what author I think would be good for Darian to check out if she hasn't yet? I would recommend Katrina Leno. I feel like that's a good bridge into a little bit of thrillery horror book mix of things. That's a good bridge from things like A Lat's Away and these other, like You Should See Me in a Crown, these YA coming of age emotional types of stories like Bloom. That's a graphic novel that I've read too. I don't know if Darian has read any Katrina Leno before, but I think all of Katrina Leno's books are great, so you really can't go wrong. But if you're looking to read a little bit of the darker stuff, you've got to read You Must Not Miss or Horrid, both of which are really fun. Horrid is the more recent one, and I feel like that's the one that maybe she wouldn't have read yet, because I could kind of see her maybe reading You Must Not Miss. But Horrid is this young adult horror book that is about this girl and her mom moving back to the mom's childhood home or their hometown, and they're living in this creepy house, and it might be haunted in some ways, and there's dark history to be uncovered. It's a really good entry point into horror because it's not as scary, it's YA, feels a little safer, but it still has those darker themes in it, and Katrina Leno's writing is just amazing. So that is definitely the one I would recommend. And next we have Keisha from A Book Like You, and I know Keisha likes to read a lot of middle grade. She likes some mysteries, she likes some graphic novels, but I'm also seeing some more like adult horror / thriller things like The Children on the Hill. So it looks like she reads a lot of Jennifer McMahon and does like them. Ooh, and she really enjoyed Verity recently, which is interesting. Ooh, I'm thinking of Ending Things, another one she really liked. Sally Hepworth book, The Younger Wife. Ooh, and Belladonna was a 4-star. Okay, so Keisha's got a lot of range here. There's a big range. Okay, I know I recommended this earlier in the video, but I do feel like Keisha would like The Getaway by Lamar Giles as well, because that one's like a little bit younger YA, and it kind of reminds me of some of the vibes of some of the things that she likes to read. I want to think of something a little darker too to recommend for Keisha because of enjoying things like, I'm thinking of Ending Things and Verity and The Children on the Hill, which I haven't read, but I've heard about. I'm thinking maybe something like Confessions by Kane Minato could be really interesting to see Keisha read, because that is like this dark psychological revenge story about this teacher whose daughter has died and she thinks some of her students are responsible for it, and you get different POVs, and it's just really dark and twisted. And it seems like Keisha likes those darker themes too, so I think that would be a really interesting one to see what she thinks about it. Okay, and now I'm going to do 5 more account recommendations. I have so many I could possibly do, so we're just gonna throw them into a wheel and spin and go based off of those 5 to finish off this video. Okay, so first up we have Kyla. Based on this book unhaul, it seems like maybe she didn't like A Little Life and Where the Crawdads Sing, which I also did not like Where the Crawdads Sing. I'm seeing some cozy books, some mysteries, more coziness, a little bit of fantasy mixed in here. Okay, a lot of bit of fantasy mixed in here. These are some books Kyla's loved. So we have Daisy Darker, Legends and Lattes, The Inheritance Games, The Weight of Blood, Let's see what else we can find. Okay, so Kyla likes young adult books and middle grade books. Ooh, okay, favorite books of 2022. This will be really helpful. Got the Inheritance Games, Echo War, Legends and Lattes, Bunny, They Never Learn, In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife, Every Heart a Doorway. So I'm seeing like cozy, good for her, weird, social commentary, and then like emotional. Okay, cozy, emotional, fantasy, young adult. What do we have for Kyla? I'm not seeing any romance, really. So this feels like a risk to potentially give a romance recommendation. But a book that's coming to mind is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, because that has this cozy and emotional feel to it as well. And I'm not a big romance reader myself either, but I really enjoyed that one. You're following this woman who's returning back to her town because her dad has recently died, and she kind of starts falling for a ghost. It's a really interesting story, and it seems like she likes paranormal things too. So it is a risk because that's a romance, but I'll throw that one out there. And then for something a little bit more in line with other things that she likes to read, I'm not seeing this one on here, but it feels like a really obvious book that she would enjoy. And that is We Spread by Ian Reid. That one is super emotional. It is a horror book with the social commentary aspect to it as well. And you're following an older woman who is going to this like retirement home. That's this unique situation, but she has dementia, and so she doesn't remember making these arrangements, and she's not quite sure if she's in a safe environment or not. And it's really just about how we treat the elderly and the horrors of aging and the horrors of losing your own sense of self. And it's really, really good and thought-provoking. And based on some of these other books I'm seeing, I feel like Kyla would really enjoy that one. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at EBK Illustrations page. I think EB is the correct way to say her name, so sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. But this is a really fun one because this is some illustrations and some really cool artwork on here. And that does make it a little bit harder to recommend a book because it's harder to understand their sense of what they enjoy in books. But I could recommend a graphic novel and use the illustration style to think about what a good graphic novel recommendation would be. Oh my goodness, this is so cute and fun. That's a little stop motion illustration. Look how cute that is. You know what this reminds me of? Specifically this like haunted house, cute little spooky one, and just the overall cute, whimsical kind of vibes of these illustrations is Sheets by Brenna Thumler, which is actually a series now. There's 2 out now, and I think the 3rd one was just announced, but I really love these graphic novels. You follow this teen girl who's really like an outsider. She feels like such an outcast after her mom has died, and she just feels like she doesn't fit in with the other kids, and then she ends up befriending a ghost named Wendell, and it is just the cutest, most wonderful, most wholesome story, and the illustration style is just absolutely gorgeous, and I just think that falls in line with this like cute, whimsical vibe of the illustration. So I would definitely recommend Sheets, and also the sequel Delicates was really good as well. Next up will be Bond. So looks like a little bit of a mix of genres here, but the theme seems to be like popular, well-loved books from what I'm seeing. So we've got Babel, Song of Achilles and Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, We Spread, Delilah Green Doesn't Care, Misery, The Luminous Dead, Uzumaki, Never Let Me Go. Ooh, and The Vegetarian, which is a very controversial one. I know people either love or hate that. I actually haven't read it myself, but I have heard about it. And that one in particular, plus some of these other ones with some darker themes to them, is making me think of The Hole as a recommendation, because that's just kind of like a weird, slow, dark book where you don't really exactly know what's going on. And I feel like that might be a fun one to try. In The Hole, you're following this man who gets into a car accident that leaves him in a really bad state, and it ends up killing his wife, and his mother-in-law is taking care of him, but then she also starts acting really strangely, and she's digging these holes in the yard, and the overall vibes are just weird. And I think that you might really enjoy that one. So I'd recommend checking out The Hole. Next up, we have Eden. And let's see what kind of books Eden enjoys. So we have The Sanatorium and Reckless Girls and Bunny, all good ones. Seems to enjoy some spookier reads. Ooh, and Sundial, one of my favorites as well. So it seems like Eden likes weirder horror. Not everything I'm seeing is super weird, but definitely seeing some weirder stuff poking out. Like Bunny is one of the quintessential weird horror books, and it seems like Eden really loves that weirdness to books as well. So I'm gonna recommend The Harpy by Megan Hunter. This one is super strange. It just has a strange atmosphere to it. I feel like it's really good for people who like books like Bunny. It's about this couple, and the woman finds out that the man cheats on her, and so they come to this agreement that she is allowed to hurt him 3 times, but he doesn't know how or when, and it's told in these little like vignette style, and so you're like desperately trying to get the full picture, but the book's only giving you so much to go with, and it's just a really eerie reading experience, and I had a lot of fun with it, so I would recommend The Harpy. And last but not least, we have Robin, who appears to currently be reading The Writing Retreat, which is one of my favorite thrillers of the year so far, so that's exciting. Let's see what we've got. It's kind of a mix of half and half of books I've read and books that I have not read. Ooh, The Last Party was a 2-star. Okay, well, that's good to know. All the Dangerous Things was a 5-star. So it seems like we might have sort of opposite tastes, because I did enjoy The Last Party and I did not enjoy All the Dangerous Things. I loved Rock, Paper, Scissors, and it was a 3 for Robin. The Family Game I did not really enjoy, and it was a 3 for Robin. A Flicker in the Dark was a 5-star, and I thought it was just kind of okay. Ooh, Survive the Night was a 4-star, and it was like a 1-star for me. So I think Robin and I might have pretty opposite tastes, so I might need to go opposite for this one and think about what is a thriller that I didn't really enjoy as much that Robin might. So the Stacey Willingham thrillers I didn't enjoy as much because they just didn't feel super original to me. They felt very like middle of the road, average thriller where not a lot's really happening, and it felt a little bit more literary. And a thriller that I read that was kind of like that I didn't enjoy that much was Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lapina, which is about this family of siblings and the parents end up dying, and it looks like one of the siblings may have done it, but it's really just more of like a family drama, and I wasn't super interested in it, so maybe Robin would enjoy that one. Or another one that I felt kind of similarly about was Mother May I by Jocelyn Jackson, where it was just like kind of average, middle of the road. It's about a woman whose child gets taken from her and then she's trying to go get her kid back, but it was described a little creepier than it actually was. Like the description talks about she sees this witch in the window, and I thought it was going to be really creepy, but it ended up just being kind of domestic and average. Not to say those books are bad, just that it wasn't what I found to be my taste, and that seems to align a little bit better since Robin seems to be a little bit opposite taste for me. So that was a really funny one to end on, of doing like an opposite recommendation, because so many of the profiles I went through seem to be people who have pretty similar taste to me. They like a lot of similar books, and so I was thinking of things I enjoyed. That was kind of funny to do it the reverse way. But yeah, that is a wrap for all of my personalized recommendations. I had so many more entries, but this would have taken me so long to get through all of them. But again, let me know if you enjoyed this and if this is something you'd like to see me do again, or if there's any kind of special twist you'd like to see on it, like maybe doing reverse recommendations like we kind of did on that last one. I feel like that could be fun. But let me know any thoughts you have below, and also if you have any additional recommendations for anyone's profile that we reviewed, you can leave those recommendations down below for them as well. And if you're just looking for more book recommendations in general, I have a million videos I've done giving book recommendations, thriller recommendations, horror recommendations, all kind of recommendations. So I'll have some of those videos linked down below, and in the end card at the end of the video I'll link a playlist with all of my book recommendation videos if you're looking for more. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!